Well, we're returning to a subject that we were covering a while back, and that's track planning. And we did a show on using CNC to carve out templates and how wonderful that is if you have some sort of access to that. A lot of these things are available in the smaller scales, usually laser cut rather than cut on a CNC router. But in the larger scales, doing what we see here, cutting them on a large laser cutting machine, just isn't practical, because even a really large laser machine like this would only be able to cut out a couple of large templates. Also, the wood is typically going to be much thicker on the larger scales. It's just added up to be a whole series of problems where the smaller scales can easily use these templates, and the larger scales, they just haven't been that widely available, and when they have, they've been really expensive. The individual sections usually connect this way, sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, because there has to be some way to connect one template into the next, ensuring a really tight connection so that you don't inadvertently get a kink. This is really amazing, but a lot of people in the small scales, I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people in the smaller scales have actually laser cut their entire railroad as a template, and then they can lay this template in place and use that to guide the placement of either their flex track or their rails as they're putting down the track, ensuring that they get very uniform radiuses and no kinking whatsoever. More typically, what you'll do is simply have templates representing different radiuses that can be laid in place, ensuring that you get a nice smooth radius curve by laying your flex track or your rails for spiking directly up against the template through the curve. This was something that I wanted to do on the railroad, but I just couldn't find anybody to supply these templates. But then an old friend from the MRS Railroad days, Dwayne, appeared and said, you know, I've got a CNC router and I'd love to help you with your turntable project. I was like, seriously? And I just sort of mentioned to him in passing how nice it would be to have some of these curvature templates, and lo and behold, he just showed up with some, and it's like, holy cow, that's great. What he brought was two different templates here. They're both cut to a 50-inch radius, which is the smallest radius that I use on the railroad, and therefore the one I'm going to have the most problems with, because if a curve like this one, laid at 50 inches, has any irregularities in that curvature, well, it's going to become a problem and could potentially derail some of the larger locomotives. This particular curve is right behind where the roundhouse is going to go, and is the entrance to the Chama yard. And at least two of my locomotives I don't think would be able to get through here, but several of the locomotives are going to have a problem here if the curve isn't absolutely perfect. Because if there's any places here where the radius is getting shorter than 50 inches, well, that's going to be a real problem. And it's quite difficult to lay out one of these curves when all you've got to lay it out with is a 50-inch piece of string that you're using as a compass. And so I laid these templates in place on top of that curve to check the curvature, and a lot of it comes in just fine, but other places it's really got some noticeable problems, and it's like, oh crap. And while I haven't gotten any derailments back here, I also haven't been running any of my largest locomotives, in part because I don't think I'll ever need to take them into the yard. But it's like, I don't think I want to live with this. I think what I want to do is unspike all this rail and redo this curve. Part of the reason this has come up is because this curve is right behind the roundhouse, and I'm laying out the roundhouse as part of the turntable project, and I'm sitting here looking at this going, if I'm going to do this, now is the time, actually, as part of the turntable project. And it was an enormous amount of work spiking all this down, individually 4 spikes per tie on tie plates. And, well, here I am pulling it all up using a pair of wire cutters. The old adage being, I guess, do it right the first time and you won't have to redo it. That's always been my thinking, and here I am getting bit by not getting it right in the first place. As I was pulling out the spikes, that managed to rip up 3 of the ties, and so I've got to clear out that area and replace these ties, glue those back down before I can proceed. It's also a bit of cleanup to do on these ties to make sure that they're ready to receive the rails again. I'm leaving the rails attached at both ends and spiked down. I just need to unspike the curve so that I can reposition the rail here in a proper curve. With all of the spikes out, I can now place the templates on top of the whole thing and position the track around until I get the exact curvature that I want through here, a very accurate 50-inch radius. I'm only working with the inside rail. I'm visualizing the outside rail, but I'm establishing the curve strictly on the inside rail. I'll worry about the outside rail later on. It's a little tiny bit tricky establishing where the tangent track turns into a curve. It'd be real easy to create a kink right there. On a large Class A railroad, you'd probably want to ease into the curve with an easement, but here on the narrow gauge railroad, it's perfectly acceptable to just have the tangent track turn into a curve. I'm just temporarily spiking that inside rail, putting a spike every 6 or 8 ties or so, just to hold everything in place to make sure that I've got the curve properly laid out before I go through here and permanently spike the inside rail. In some places, the rail's going right back down where it came from, and in some places like here, you can see just how far off the curvature I was. But when you consider again, I laid this out just using a string and a Sharpie as a compass, you're going to end up with small problems like that. And this is why it's so nice to have these templates if you can. We are so lucky to have Dwayne carve these out for us on his CNC router. They've already come in so handy, just fixing what I knew was a problem with this curve. Once the inside rail is properly spiked in place and a proper curvature established, then I will come back and spike the outside rail using a track gauge. This is the micro engineering track gauge, and one of the things I like about it is it snaps in place. It's just plastic and it snaps onto the rails and will hold them in place. And I'm actually using this while I'm spiking the inside rail just to sort of visualize what the gauge is going to look like and so on. And it's kind of nice to see where that outside rail is going to land to make sure it's not getting way out on the ends of the ties or something. But everything's lining up just fine. It's just that the rails are in a slightly different position now. Final spiking will be done with this track gauge. This is the Yagas Creek 3-point track gauge. I got this from Mike over at Yagas Creek. And it's a much more accurate way to do final gauging of your track, as it's a 3-point track gauge and it therefore can't twist, where a 2-point track gauge could conceivably get slightly off. It's got that open area there at the top, and you can spike right down through there, ensuring that you're getting the track absolutely engaged. One problem that came up is where this rail joint in the outside rail was nice and tight before. Now with the curve slightly wider, a gap has opened up here of approximately 4 millimeters. It's pretty big. Now, I always save my trims when I'm cutting rail. I guess that's a little bit fanatic, but I throw these little trims into a plastic cup and save them. And so here we have a trimmed off piece. It's almost the exact right size. So I was able to grind it down just slightly, and it fits neatly inside the rail joiner and closes in that gap. I think what I'll do is a little soldering here as well to ensure that the gap isn't a problem. You really don't want to have any gaps in the outside rail on a curve, especially a sharp curve like this one. Anyway, I think the hardest part of the work is done. Now just comes the tedious part, and that's re-spiking the whole thing in its proper location. And then I can get back on the project I have been working on, the turntable and the roundhouse, knowing that this curve behind the roundhouse is proper now and doesn't have a slight reduction in its radius as it goes through this incredibly sharp curve. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you are a subscriber to the channel. And if not, please subscribe, and you can do that by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Zoink, right there, the blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet, and we hope you didn't find it boring, and Karen and I will see you here on Sunday. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.